My name is Karin Lucas, and at Agoria, for those who don't know Agoria, Agoria is the technology federation in Belgium. We unite more than 2,000 companies in the technological industry, both in manufacturing, building technology, materials, but also the digital and telecom companies. So it's really a diverse group. Um, there, I am team lead of the DigiCoach project, which is a project where we try to help our member companies, but more broadly industry, in tackling digital transformation. Because, as you know, for a lot of companies, it's very difficult to understand in all the possibilities of digital where they have to start and how to map their journey. So we started about a year and a half ago with a study called Digitalism Mindset, where we did a survey for 400 industrial SMEs in all industrial sectors and also industrial services. And we asked questions in three different groups. First on processes, how do they digitize their processes internally or also over together with the supply chain or value chain? The second was innovation, digital innovation, and how far do they use digital technology to make their services and products smarter or have new business models, etc. And the third one was culture, because it's a broad name, culture, but we looked at how do they involve their employees, do they work with partners, how do they make digital part of their strategy, because we already felt that it's often there that things might go wrong or project failed. So we had this study, Digitalism Mindset. I might share a link to it in the chat later. And Bike wrote a very nice comment on the study on LinkedIn, and that's how we got in touch. We started talking. Bike did a deep dive into the numbers, both of our survey and of the scan that we have online that mimics the survey. And you can get interesting things from numbers, but we thought it was to really understand what makes projects fail or succeed. We need to know the story behind the numbers. So from Agoria, we contacted companies of which we know they are front runners, and Bieke and Paul, together with us when we had time, did interviews with these companies um, to better understand. And why do we think this is really necessary still? Because there's so much written already about digital transformation, but we see companies struggling with it every day. We see that it's a very long journey that you embark upon, and companies struggle especially with creating value. How can we really, you can do a lot of things with digital. The problem is a bit that the technology is so abundant these days that you can do so many things that it's hard to choose what do you do and how do you create values. It's the case with ROI and processes, but especially in innovation, there's so much you can do. I've been working in digital innovation for 20 years, and where before the question was, can we build something? And the challenge was more technological. Now the challenge is very much more, how can we create value? And you see some sometimes funny examples. I like collecting them. For instance, in consumer products, you see things like laundry machine that send you an overview of last month. 60% of the cycles you did were cotton, and 20% were wool. Or you can follow the program. And I must admit, in the last year with COVID, my weekends weren't all equally exciting, but I've never come to the point where I said, like, I would like to see now if my machine is rinsing or spinning. And another one I saw was a $6,000 fridge that has cameras inside the fridge and then a screen on the front of the fridge, so you can see what is inside the fridge. And you could also look at movies on that screen, because that's of course what we want to do, stand in our kitchen and look on a movie on our kitchen door. And then I say you can uh, play recipes, but I can also play recipes on a tablet and use $1,000 fridge, for example. So there's a lot of examples like that, and we can laugh with it. But on the other hand, these are often top companies that are really struggling with what should we do with the technology, this technology. How do we offer services? How do we create value? So the bottom line is, we see that this transformation, it's a journey. Really, the focus is on transformation and the change management, not on the digital. We should come to a point where digital is just part of how you run your company. Like we no longer talk about digital cameras because all cameras are digital, except some, we say analog cameras now, that's the exception. It should become part of the way we run our business. And that's what we wanted to get more insights in, still more, and be able to share the knowledge that we gain in this project with other companies to help them move further. So that was why we were very happy to work with AMS on these interviews. And I think Bieke will now share us some insights that she got from that.
Thank you very much, Karin. Yes, indeed. So we were also wondering, how do companies continue to boost their digital maturity? Like Karin said, value creation is really a challenge. So maybe they have had some experiments, but then what distinguishes the companies that go from doing these proof of concepts to really changing the organization and realigning the organization, the processes, the people, so that they can continue to create novel solutions, even more value for the customer, not just within the organization, not just within this small project, but really carry it outward and really scale it up. So we had the opportunity of speaking with 7 really digital frontrunners, 4 SMEs, 2 multinationals as well, and 1 digital native. And it is based on these interviews that we're sharing, the insights that we're sharing with you today. So there are 2 things. First, I would like to challenge you a little bit on how we usually look at digital maturity, which is of course also the topic of today, digital maturity, or being able to continuously realize and scale up that value creation for the customer. And then we will look at some key challenges that we identified, and also give you some guidelines on how you may approach this in the future to facilitate your own digitalization. So first, I'm trying to move my screen, but it is not moving. There we go. So first, digital maturity. I would ask by raise of hands, but I cannot see you, how many people recognize this model. And the funny thing is actually, this is a template, so it's not even a real digital maturity model, but the fact that there's a template out there ready to talk about digital maturity shows how widespread that this idea is of digital maturity being a process that you can cut into certain steps that are, similar across organizations. It's very linear. You can just scale it up from one step to the other. What we've seen in the cases is that this is absolutely not the case. It is not possible in digitalization to foresee what will happen in 2 or 3 or 4 steps. It's more something that you develop along the road as you go. It's actually it's a quite messy process with high uncertainty that really emerges from the organization through an interaction between customers, between the organization, management, the digital transformation team, but everyone is really working together in small change cycles. At least that's what we saw in the organizations that were really moving forward at a higher speed than the others. So that's the first thing that I want to share with you, to really step away from this traditional way of thinking. There's an optimal order of stages. We all go through them. No, it is about making these small iterative cycles of change. And even though the idea of agile thinking is quite spread already, we notice that it's still quite difficult for organizations, especially manufacturing, to step away from this plan, execute, evaluate, and reorganize or realign the project way of thinking. And that's also my first question to you. And now I'll be launching the first poll. There we go. So I'm wondering, just to get a read of the room in your organization or the organizations that you work with most of the time, would you say that they approach it more in a linear way of thinking, that they really already use those small iterative approach, or maybe a different approach that is not even mentioned here? So I'm just going to wait very shortly. And I'm very glad to see, because you cannot see the results yet, that the second option is winning here a little bit. Let me see, we're almost all there. So, of course, we're also here to gain more insights into strategic and human challenges. So I assume that most of the people here are already quite interested in the topic, which may lead to the insights that I'm seeing here, or the results. At least you should be seeing them now, that the winner here is a small iterative cycles, but there's still 30% in which companies work quite linearly. So that was the first thing that I wanted to share with you, is to really step step away from that. And it can be very difficult for organizations because they don't really see where they are then headed. Because if it's just one change after the next, how do you navigate through that? And how can you also explain this to the organization that there is still some sort of continuity, some sort of evolution that leads towards a certain end or a certain goal? Because there's a lot of uncertainty. One of the cases here, someone said many technologies that are hot today, they were not even on our radar 5 years ago. If it's not on your radar, if you're not aware of the technology yet, you cannot include it in that roadmap. You cannot plan it in the program. But it's not just technologies. Sometimes customers don't even know what they want until you present them with a first mock-up, and then they can build on that. So what did we see? And that's the first beacon or the first guideline that we want to share with you. How can you ensure that whatever steps that you're taking, that they all contribute to moving from that experimental phase past the proof of concept phase toward transformation, is by using these small change cycles. And then we noticed that there were actually two evolutions. There was the evolution towards being more professional. So if you want to automate something, you cannot use random processes. You will be using the same standard process all the time. So it's part professionalization, and it's also integration internally and externally, and I will come back to that in a minute. Regardless of what you decide to do, digitalization should always lead to value creation and caption. I think that the person who actually said this, one of our interviews, he's present in the room, and I will put it nicely, but it basically came down to digitalization without value creation makes absolutely no sense. I will give you an example. One of the cases made a beautiful app which was very interesting for their customers because they could access a lot of knowledge, they could connect with the right people easily, they could connect to their machines. However, they were not asked to make an account, so they could just access it very freely, which from a user point of view seems nice because it's, you cannot forget your password. That in itself is already great. However, the company did not capture value or was not able to capture the data in that interaction, which made it difficult for them in the next step to actually go and improve the customer experience and to also capture the data, the value that they were creating in that process. So whatever you do, always keep in the back of your mind that it is about value creation and it is about caption. And there was one person, I don't know if you can see this, it's at the top of my screen, who said that whatever you do, make sure that this small step in itself already makes sense and that you can build on it in the longer term. Then how do you go about going from one change cycle to the next? Because it is a lot about change. Karin also mentioned it right now. And it was also shared in the cases that this change management story, not just internally with sales team, with, for example, with the services team, but also with customers from outside. This is actually the most time and energy consuming part of digital transformation. And what was very clear from all the cases and all the people that we spoke with was that there is incredibly strong belief in digitalization and a shared sense of urgency, at least between the digital team and management. And this is what allows them to really go from one change cycle to the next, almost like rocket fuel. And this was one of the quotes which really illustrates it beautifully. So they say that this person said, I really believe that digital will disappear as a term. So there's only one way, that's a digital way. And the people who worked in these companies that allowed to scale up from one step to the next, they saw digital not as a purpose, not as the end goal, but just as a tool to really realize whatever company goals that they had, whether it was to support growth, whether it was to connect closer to the customer, etc. And then I have my next question for you. I'm just wondering how far you are today in sharing that or getting that common sense of urgency and digital belief in your organization. And I'm looking at my colleague, Emmanuel, I'm not really sure. Oh, there we go. You should see it right now. So is it really shared among top management? Is there a small group of believers right now? Is it already management and the digital transformation team? We say, oh, our entire organization is on board, or even our entire organization and our customers, our technological developers who support us in creating these solutions. Just really curious to hear that from you. Okay, very diverse answers so far. So what I'm seeing so far is that the third option is winning. So that's also what we've noticed. It is very often it's definitely that bottom up and top down. So you need that middle management to really, because they're closer to the customer, they're closer to the internal customers, you could say, they're closer to the people to mobilize them. Let me end the polling and share it with you. But I'm very happy to see that also some of you already said that the entire organization is on board, the entire organization and even external stakeholders are on board. So I think this is definitely something that you could also discuss in the experience exchange labs, which will take place later, how you came about to doing that, because this is a step that we see in the companies that is very tricky to realize. And then this is another quote, just to illustrate that it's not just about change management internally, but it's also about convincing the customer, especially in traditional industries, to use the tool, because the tool may be, they also need to make the effort, and especially in the manufacturing industry that we study, customers are very often not ready themselves to see the value and to be willing to go ahead, even though it facilitates, it makes their life easier. So these slides will also be shared with you, by the way. These are 5 key beliefs that should be shared, not just amongst top and middle management, but also throughout the entire organization by salespeople, by customers, and by other value creating partners. So I'm not going to elaborate too much on this, but it basically comes down to the fact that digitalization is not just, people are not just resisting change because they don't want to change, but sometimes they just don't believe it. They don't see why it is necessary. They don't believe that it is the only solution. For example, there was a case, one of the cases that had some trouble at the beginning of their digitalization journey. And some people at the top had even said, oh, digitalization, it's just, this shall pass too. Like it was just something that would come and go. So people need to really buy into the value and the fact that this is here to stay. Leadership was very important as well. If they're not engaged, they will not feel the necessary budgets. They will not go outside and share with the world what's being done in the organization, which is also something that one of our cases did. And that really generated a lot of pull for finding the right people, finding budgets, etc. And of course, it's important that digitalization is also considered valuable to the people. And the way to realize this is to communicate. So digitalization and boosting your digital maturity, it really depends a lot on change management and communication. Like this person said, you cannot over communicate. So sometimes she felt like she had told the same thing over and over again, but sharing it even twice as much can only facilitate the growing and scaling up. So this is more about how do you go about it, then what is it that you're going to realize? That brings us to the third challenge. Yes.
Can I disturb for a second? There are a few questions in the chat.
Okay.
So perhaps we can just have a look at that. One of the participants, Patrick Peters, he says, okay, value creation, I got that, but what does value capture or really stands for? So basically what we see is that on the one hand, you can create a lot of value on the internet, on platforms, on all kinds of links that you have digitally. But do you also capture the value? Do you also get a share, a nice share of that value to you? So you might create a lot, but also give a lot away and give a lot of customer wins away. So that's why we mention both. Yeah. Now then, another question has to do with, I have some trouble here. There's another question. Culture for companies where top management is not committed yet. What is the recommended process to make aware share stakeholders change is needed? Bieke, do you want to go into this, or do you say that we have to wait until you unveil this? Or
I think it's a very interesting question, and this is definitely, it's not, digitalization is not a top-down process only, but you really do need them, and you really do need to have them to commit to the project in order to at least create credibility and enable everyone else to move forward. So it's a very good question. And the recommended process to make aware share or stakeholders change is needed. It is about, I don't know how exactly you go about that yet, because the cases that we saw, it was actually with a change of a person. So someone new came in and they were already believers, they were already digital believers when they entered the organization, and then they kind of pushed that forward. So how do you really change the mindsets of people who are already there in the organization? I think it is about also going through these 5 key beliefs and bringing a message in a way that appeals to them and that makes them see, okay, this is necessary and this is the appropriate way to move forward. And we as an organization are also capable of doing this. So it's about influencing their mindset and making them comfortable with digitalization. So it can range from making sure that they have background knowledge as well, because sometimes they're just not familiar with it. But I think it's mainly about changing their mindset, and it can be quite tricky. So we didn't see the cases that we saw where there was a switch. It was because there was new management that arrived who already had a digital agenda. So I hope that that helps for now.
Well, last point, perhaps there was in the chat, a last point, Stefan Fischler, he asked, what is the link between the organization and its processes and producing data and value-added analytics? I just want to give one example. We studied, we only report part of data that we have. We also studied some Chinese companies that were manufacturing companies and adopted, let's say, Industry 4.0, Internet of Things in their back offices, in their production environments to create smart production. Then they gradually found out that they were producing a lot of data and capturing a lot of data from their customers. And then you can see that at a certain moment, they switch into, let's say, transforming the platform from an internal orientation into a value creating machine, because they suddenly start thinking, oh, but we can be more flexible towards customer needs, we can be more custom made and increase our customization up to personalization. So basically you can clearly see that they are making a switch at a certain moment. So often not really intended from the start, but they create first the data, they start seeing the value, and then they start applying, let's say, a front-end value creation on that platform. So it was very interesting to see that, that outside in, after the inside out that they applied with the technology. Perhaps a last point at this stage, and then we give the word back to Bieke, how to measure value creation. There are not yet a lot of ROE tools for digitalization, at least not what it brings to the human. That's quite a question. Could I think about this for a while? And in the meantime, we give the word back. Sonja van der Linde asked this question. I would like to think twice before saying something stupid on this question. So perhaps Bieke, you can continue with the presentation, and then I promise Sonja that we will come back to this.
Yes, thank you very much, Paul. Actually, the two next challenges also relate to value creation. And the first one is, how are you going to translate all the possibilities from tomorrow into a specific action plan today? Because at the end of the day, it is still about doing things now. And it is nice to have some idea of why you're doing it and that it makes sense in the future. And this quote shows response from someone who participated in a workshop. So they did a workshop with a consulting firm, and a consulting firm asked them to imagine themselves in the year 2050 and what they would be doing and what they would be offering services wise. And she said at the end, the organization, that the people that participated, they really felt like the consulting firm had absolutely no idea what they were, trying to get out of them. They didn't know where they wanted to go as an organization. But actually nowadays, and she still has that leaflet that she got at the end of the workshop still on her desk. She says nowadays the ideas that we developed in that workshop, they're actually pretty standard. So it's just at the moment we weren't ready to see or to really think that far ahead. So what we're seeing is in this challenge, it's not just about capabilities, because they're very often highlighted. It's difficult to find the right people because we're looking for very specialized people. Budgets are limited. There's also a lot of information missing. We don't know which future technology will be out there, like the quote that I showed before. You can make a plan of about 5 years, but what technology will be hot in 5 years, very difficult to predict. Same with customer needs. And as we saw with the recent pandemic, it's also difficult to know what society will look like, which additional restrictions or opportunities will be out there. But it's not just about capabilities. It's also about a mindset. And as humans, we have a tendency of being biased against things that seem too foreign to us. So it's difficult to start thinking about that and really stretch our mindsets to start creating things that are maybe not even thought of yet. And what we see in the industry that we're researching in, which is the manufacturing, very traditional industry, there's still the reactive mindset is still very present. In the cases that we studied, we saw a very different approach. It was very proactive, in which the future was considered something that could be shaped, even legislation. So one of the case studies, and I think they're present here today as well. They actually developed the legislation already before Europe came up with rules on how to share data, etc. So there are different ways of going about it, and the people who are ahead of the pack, they know how to stretch their mindsets and they know how to be proactive. And one of the things, and this is again the beacon that I want to share with you, is that they're very good at expanding both their capabilities and their mindsets by banking on strong and very structural partnerships, as well as networking with like-minded organizations and customers. There was one person who said, like, you can measure how digitally ready an organization is by measuring how much time that people spend outside their organization. Again, in manufacturing, people really remain within the walls of their organization, what they're used to, but it's by going outside and by talking with people, very often new ideas on what will be hot in the future. It actually came from these networking events. It came from talking with customers, and it came from talking with people in the industry and even outside the industry. And this brings me to one of the key points, and I'm looking at my time here, which is yes, digital maturity and being able to scale up. It's also about integrating, but it's not just about integrating systems. It's very much about integrating human relations as well. And we can distinguish between the internal and the external environment. And then we see that very essential integrations need to take place between IT and business, which is something that is shared very often. But when we talk about business, we also think about R&D, also think about sales, also think about your services people. And between this, the people who are ahead of the pack, like we saw in the poll before, the third option, very often the digital transformation team is on board, management is already on board, but the broad organization, they also need to connect with these people in order for the transformation to take place. And then when we look externally, of course, we need to make that link with customers, not ad hoc, not just randomly based on a project basis. And we saw one of the cases, and I hope they're also present here today, where they actually have a pool of customers that they can visit, that they give trainings to them. And then sometimes when they have ideas, they can exchange ideas with them and ask feedback very early on in the process. So it's not that when they have a proof of concept, they ask a couple of customers and then they build on that. But the customers are there and they are committed to the customers also beyond these proof of concept projects. And that's what I mean when I talk about structural relationships with customers. The same with building relationships with external value creating partners, like this quote shows. So they have the development of the front end is not inside, is not part of the organization right now, but this person who is really an integrator, I would say, he really made the bridge between IT and business. He really made the bridge with sales, also with the external organization. Instead, working together as partners, it's new and it's something that I'm learning, but it's something that we're really getting a lot out of. And what he did was not just asking for feature updates and saying like, this is going wrong, but also when they got really nice feedback from the customer, he would share this information, like we got really nice feedback. And then he also asked them to really engage in the conversation and to challenge them on what they had in mind. So he says it's about including them in the organization as if they were part of the organization, and at the same time also asking them to step into that role and really think along as if they were part of our organization. And then I have a new poll for you just to get an idea of how you or the organizations that you work with are currently connected to your partners. I was still sharing the results. My apologies for that. So there we go. So do you still mainly focus on developing products in-house? Do you have some connections with value creating partners, but do you keep them at a distance? Do you have these very structural partnerships so that you work with them on a regular basis, that they exist outside of the project as well? Or do you even go a step beyond that, and do you actively pursue new co-creating partnerships continuously by looking for opportunities, even at a barbecue, literally, or at network events, or when you're at the European Commission talking about everything that you're doing with your company? So I'm seeing for now, the second option is winning. So there are some co-creations going on, and it's also something that we notice. I don't know out of which industries most of the people are, but especially again in manufacturing, generating that trust in consulting, in other people, in other parties, and also for the other side to understand what it means to be a partner in that relationship is very challenging. So I'm just going to end the polling and share them with you. So the second option wins here, but I'm very glad also here to see that quite a significant amount of people already have those structural relationships or even continuously pursue new ones. If we then move forward to the fourth challenge, it is about, like we said before, it's about creating value. It's about not just creating something interesting and fun, like a screen in front of your fridge so you can see what is inside of the fridge, but it's about creating something that is valued by the customer, that they're willing to pay for as well, and also that you can eventually capture money from. And this also relates to integration with the customer. So this was really surprising to me because this firm was already very customer oriented in the first place, but even they told me in the interviews that in the past years, they even banked more on that. And they also really started with showing very small parts of the solution, sharing it with them, which is also, again, in manufacturing, very different from the usual way of working where you develop a project and then at the end, when it's considered finished, you present it to the customer. So it's about magic, it's about creating value, but also being able to capture that value. And what we see in the firms that were very good at creating value with customers is that they go through an evolution from a place where they just inform the customer and say like, okay, here's our product, it's a great product, enjoy the product, to really listening and asking them, including them in the project a little bit earlier on when it's almost finished, to really having that conversation, asking, okay, what is it that you're really interested in before even developing it? And then the structural co-creation that we talked about before. And one of the things that are one of the best cases also showed was that they actively searched for the most difficult customer. And the idea was that these people will also be most open or most appreciative of the efforts to really listen to them and to change that around. They went along with the people from sales, and then sales again was also happy. They were happy because their most difficult customer was taken care of even more so. So this is also quite exceptional in manufacturing. And what we've seen in the cases is that it kind of depends on where digitalization is also starting. So this was coming from more the marketing department, where people are used to also really engaging with the customer, but it seemed to be very effective and very powerful. And then when we look at money, but when we talk about value capture, one of the things that we also saw in the cases that were very successful is that they look beyond their first line customer. I would say they look beyond their regular customer. And a tip that was shared is that in order to think beyond that regular customer, you can actually map out the money streams, the data streams, and then the streams of your products and services. Because maybe, yes, you're selling new services to your customer, but it may be way more interesting to sell or to do something with the data that you capture in that interaction to someone else who's further up or down the value chain. So really think beyond traditional, this is us, this is the customer, we're making a product, so they're supposed to pay for it, because that can be very tricky at times. I'm going to skip this one just to take to be mindful of our timing. So the final challenge is a very tricky one. And when I talk about that, I call it the wicked problem nature of digitalization. So what is this about? It is about the fact that you're collaborating with a lot of parties and you cannot calculate and you cannot define everything beforehand. it kind of, you could look at a wicked problem if you think about the parable of the blind man. So as you can see, they all have their own perspective, and from where they're standing, they're all right. But in order to understand that what they're actually dealing with is an elephant, and in order to move the elephant forward without crushing any of the blind men, they need to collaborate, they all need to commit, and they need to continuously communicate. And what we see in digitalization is that there are many, many interdependencies. Very short example, in the process, in the back end, they were working toward professionalization. So they were kind of mapping out the processes, and they needed people from the business units to join them to explain this is how we usually work. And the business units sent people, but they sent the 2 people who were benched, who didn't really have anything going on. That's not the right way to go, because when they enter and they don't have the right information, they don't know exactly what would be the best way to approach the process, or how a process would have to be upgraded or updated when certain value propositions change. You're endangering the entire project. So it might seem like not such a big deal, but everything is so interconnected, everything is so interdependent that it can really affect the entire project. Also, what we notice is that some tensions, they're just there and they cannot be solved. We like to solve things in general. So that's also a big issue. And what we see, that's my final comment here, is that very often people need to work together who think or live in very different worlds. When you develop software for an app, for example, you can develop new software every day. But when you develop a machine, the cost of the material itself already makes it a very different question, very different issue. And people in R&D are very often used to working in that linear way rather than that agile mindset. But in order for digital maturity, in order to grow in that, you really need to bring these people together and have them communicate with each other. So this is actually the research that we're doing right now. So if you're interested in any updates, please let me know. So we should be able to go back to this in September, probably. And this is the final poll, and also the question that we will be discussing in the experience exchange labs. So out of these 5 challenges, out of navigating through this uncertainty, creating a shared sense of urgency and belief, translating tomorrow into today. Let me launch the poll for you. Which out of all these, and I'm very curious to see your answer here, is currently most challenging to you, to your organization, or to the organizations that you are that you're consulting or that you're collaborating with. So I'm seeing some answers, and actually the third one that's interesting is quite convincingly winning here. We're at 50%. So let me quickly, in the meantime, while you continue voting, explain what we will do in a minute. We will be divided into 3 groups, and it's up to the group to appoint a chair, to pick a chair, to have a chair volunteer, someone who will be giving a brief summary of the discussion at the end of the session. So we will be divided into 3 groups. We have 30 minutes, and we have some questions prepared for you. So it would be very interesting to hear from one another which of the challenges that we've discussed today keeps you awake at night, what you think really causes these challenges, and what your organization is currently doing to resolve them. So let me end the polling and just quickly share the results with you so you can also see them. So yeah, very interesting. I didn't expect this, that translating tomorrow into today would be one of the most challenging ones. And Emmanuel, I see that there's some questions in the chat. Let's see if we can get back to them after the experience exchange rooms as well.
So we're back.
We're back, and we just started a new conversation because I thought we had till 11:40, but 11:45. Very, very glad to see you all back. I don't know who wants to go ahead first. Maybe the group from Paul, who will be chairing.
Yeah, we had a very interesting conversation, Bieke, and well, the group finally asked me, but it's definitely a lot has coming out of the group. So just the key points. First of all, we started with the fact that it's thinking in new boxes, not thinking out of the box, but thinking in new boxes. where business model transformation and business transformation is the key. And this implies design thinking and empathy with our customers. Somebody cited a big management guru saying, get the hell out of the building and talk to customers and co-design, co-create. So start that conversation. That's one thing. Second thing, how do we go from latent digital companies to actual, where there is a need for some business maturity or digital business maturity scan, where we can prove that our company is attractive to digital natives to work with us, where we can show that the companies are really on top of this. Then we focused a while on SMEs, and we said, like, a big bang innovation will not work in that setting. It's incremental. It's more lean startup, I would say. Small projects to keep people in pace with the change. And then that's more the salami approach, we said, where you can reassure people, you can show temporary results. And somebody said we also should feast these little results, which can be really small. But then we came to two last points. First of all, so keep simplicity. That's linked to that. Make it simple. For instance, how many KPIs do you want? Well, you need a lot, because there's a lot of skills, there's a lot of KPIs, but on the other hand, perhaps you should build a tree model so that at least it is a little bit grouped and it's more simple. Last point, leadership. So lead by example, empower experimentation, and use also, last point, perhaps a long-term perspective on customer value. You cannot have the short-term next month ROE. You cannot meet that. It was said you should have a long-term. So educate the board. That's the most difficult part, probably.
And this also comes back to one of the questions that was asked earlier, right? Like, what about top management and how do you get them involved?
Yeah, it's very difficult in a way.
Very interesting, lively discussion, seems like. Karin.
In our group, we decided that Katja would bring the summary.
Thank you. So I made notes on my phone and I will use them. We had a very interesting discussion, and our group, I think, consisted of people with very different backgrounds and also from different sectors. And I am so excited about how similar our pain points are. And we talked about the connecting issues. So we started with discussing what keeps us all awake at night. And maybe connecting to how do we translate tomorrow into today. And so in terms of the pain points, we started with the fact that there is a lot going on in digital transformations. Companies across the board are starting with something, but the most critical point is to get the basics right. And there is very often a mismatch between inflated expectations of the value that this transformation will bring us and not having the basics right. And this is something that the companies need to focus on. When we talk about governmental segment, which is not the industry, there also there is a challenge on getting people into process thinking. So really, before we bring new tech to automate the processes, we need to talk to people and formulate the processes. And as we do that, it's also important to make sure that the process is not just rigid. So we really need to formulate something before we can automate it. But we also need to make the process modular, not from fixed, completely fixed, but maybe split it into parts and make this business process by design modular, when parts can be exchanged by more optimal and working parts. So process flow definition is important, and this relates to many stakeholders having completely different digital maturity skills. And this brings us to the next big pain point, the digital transformation should always come hand in hand with human transformation. And if we talk about maybe more old-fashioned industries like mining or slow industries, we see there that there is a huge percentage of the workforce which are simply not ready for digital products. And this raises a need to teach these basic abilities to people. And otherwise, they will simply not be able to participate in the work. Which brings us to the next point on, okay, so this is a human transformation. We need to teach digital skills. And we shouldn't be afraid that tech will come and steal the jobs. We will need other types of jobs as we automate mundane tasks. And for that, we absolutely need to do training people. I think the opportunity for people with disabilities, automation is a huge opportunity to get more jobs, but the training is needed. And training needs to be in the human language, not in the technical language. Tangible, actionable actions is important. And maybe the last point, if I still have half a minute. So you can cut me off.
Go ahead.
I think something worth sharing, what the group shared, what are the tips of resolving the issues, the big issues? And I think first and foremost, engage the customer. As we in the company are trying to build something new and digital, we absolutely need to involve the end user in the process. Otherwise, they will have an allergic reaction and not use the new tech that we're bringing. Increase awareness and desire, and also build best practices and share best practices. Not be afraid to go to other, whether it is competitors or in the public sector, to other institutions to share their successes and best practices to increase awareness and willingness to change. And in co-creation, we talked about within digital transformation, different teams of stakeholders need to work together towards the same goal. We need to make the goal and the path transparent initially and bring technical people and business people into the process very early on. And because a lot of patience will be required for these stakeholders to try to speak the same language, since they come with very different languages, we need to unite them with something visible. So they always need to go towards something visible, and then value capture, the expected improvement, the success, the KPIs that we're going to reach could be that big umbrella which will connect people and ask their commitment to plow through the communication issues and work together.
Thank you.
That is it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katja. I think it's very interesting to see how the same questions lead to entirely different conversations. And in our group as well, quickly come back to what we've discussed. We mainly looked at challenges, actually, mainly the challenge of convincing people or getting people on board and spreading that belief on the one hand toward customers and on the other hand towards salespeople. And I think one of the interesting things, we're not going to make this too long here, one of the really interesting things is that we also had someone from sales in our team, and he said that there's always a good reason why salespeople are not willing to change. So it may have been because they are not excited about the limited prospects financial products when they sell services, for example. But he said when you offer digital services, you may be limited in the extent to which you can customize and you can really bank on that customer intimacy. And that is exactly what I love to do as a salesperson. So, and then we had a conversation about, is it exclusive? Is it either customization or is it digitalization? But in fact, one of the cases really banks on digitalization to support their customized offer to the customer. And they recognize that indeed, when you want to customize a lot, it asks a lot from the backend. So it's very important that the front end and the backend communicate well, and it becomes complex and it becomes intricate. But because they were able to do that, because they were able to overcome that, for them, it's actually one of their competitive advantages. So just to round up, it's not because it is challenging that it cannot be done. It can actually be the thing that distinguishes you or that strengthens you towards the customers. We discussed some other things, but I think it's good to round up here because I see some people are ready for lunch, I guess. So I just want to thank you all very much for being here, for the interesting exchanges as well. And I think, Paul, I'll leave the floor to you to round up here.
Well, thank you, Bieke. I think although we had different accents in a way in the working groups, we all said in a way what was the red line a little bit through this morning session. That is, it's not about technology, it's more about the process of managing it and of sharing it with stakeholders. So I think the modular process from one group and the salami approach of another, it's about digital, but also human transformation. I think these are some elements that we all share. So another and last point I think that we all share is the concern that there's a lot of complexity involved, and that means that we cannot plan everything. We should do small experiments, and I think that's where I see a lot of the well, we academics, we call it effectuation. We cannot do causation. We don't know when we do this, that will happen. This customer value will be created, but we can do what we call effectuation. We seek effects with, for instance, we sell a minimum viable solution, product service system on a platform, and then we do see the reaction. We talk to customer stakeholders. We see if additional stakeholders can be joined to increase shareholder value. So that lean startup approach a bit and that philosophy, but that's not easy to bring that in a company. But I liked a lot what one of you said, that is that it's an opportunity for other types of jobs. It's an opportunity also for customers to create additional customer value. But there were some principles here, like KISS, keep it simple, stupid, in as stupid and as simple as possible. Let's call it that way. So I think there was a lot here to discuss, and I do hope that the discussion and the inspiration that helped you. There will be some future event from Agoria. I would like to stress that, where we will go deeper into this study and where we will present some more tools based on it. And Bieke, I thought that you wanted to share that date. If I don't miss it, it was somewhere on in October. Karin, you can add that.
It's in the week. It's in the week of 18 October. We have the big Acumen event of October, and it's a couple of days. And the exact date isn't fixed yet, but it's
okay. But so
18,
the week of 18 October. So we will meet again then with some of the people present here, and also Bieke and I and the team and Karin. We will also write a white paper and share that. So that's also something we can promise. So the discussion is not finished here today. I thank you all for coming. Thank you so much, and enjoy lunch. Yes, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.